faith, trust, and confidence in our election process has been on the decline for decades in this country. That is nothing new. The question then becomes, how are you going to fix it? One of the biggest problems in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania was that you had state legislatures that passed good bills and then governors refused to sign them. In this past election, I thought for sure we maybe pick up one of those seats, preferably Tudor-Dixon in Michigan. I thought we could maybe squeak out something if everything worked out in Pennsylvania. Here's a worse problem in those places. I hate to say this, but now the legislatures in both Michigan and Pennsylvania have flipped Democrat. So the chances of them actually putting forth legislation that would protect voters is absolutely minimal, if not nothing.
Well, zero. And in Michigan, it's worse, Hogan, because there was a proposition. And Michigan's one of those places where you can make it a constitutional amendment. So we will now have 9 days of early voting. They told the people, it means voter ID is mandatory. No, it doesn't. Voter ID is mandatory, but if you say I don't have one, you get to sign a piece of paper and then you're off the hook. And in Michigan, I don't know right now if a Republican could win a statewide election in Michigan under any circumstances because the way they've set the system up.
No question. It'd be very difficult. As red as Florida just went, Michigan went blue in the opposite direction. You talked about
it's terribly sad because we're not that blue of a state. We are a purple state, except that the system gets gamed. And so here's what I want to ask you, because we keep having these conversations on the right. Michigan, Tudor-Dixon, you mentioned her. She lost by 10 points in the end. That wasn't a stolen election. That was an election where she had no money in August and September, and she got pounded with tens of millions of dollars in advertising. TV advertising works in elections, obviously, and it was all negative. They just pounded on her for 8 weeks, and she couldn't respond because she didn't have the financial resources to do so. Outspent like $70 million to $7 million, right? So every time somebody loses doesn't mean somebody cheated. Fair?
That's absolutely correct. It doesn't mean there wasn't cheating. It doesn't mean there wasn't irregularity or illegality. But the fact is, these candidates matter. And of course, money matters. You talked about Tudor-Dixon. I went and spoke for her in Michigan. It was an outstanding event. People were fired up. They were excited. They wanted some of their parental control and their rights back that had been stripped away by Gretchen Whitmer. And the same thing applies to someone like Bolduc in New Hampshire. A lot of these folks ran a campaign that began to pick up steam toward the end. The problem was, as you pointed out, now you're having to fight against millions and millions and millions of dollars that have been used to destroy you up until that point. And so a lot of the powers that be in the Republican political circle said, we're not going to get involved in that race. No chance, no chance. And as soon as they saw signs of life in Michigan, they come in there. But it's too late.
They did, but it was too late. Because by the time they showed up, early voting in Michigan began on September the 29th. You showed up too late. If Dixon had the support in August and September, she was a good candidate, great candidate.
Right.
She just was outspent and crushed, and all those negative ads, and the early voting began September 29th. Didn't even get a debate until the end of the second week of October.